Are you a fan of pro wrestling, comedy, and combat sports? Then we have the podcast for you because we cover that and much, much more.
Do you like to debate with your friends? Do we have the perfect segment for you? It's the 531, where we take any given subject, break it down to a top 5. From there, we debate it down to 3, and then into that number 1 spot.
If you want to get a hold of us, find us on our social medias. Search Working Fans Podcast on any major social media platform. And if you want to find the podcast, search for us on any major podcast platform, as well as YouTube.
Working Fans Podcast. We put in the work so you don't have to.
Fans, welcome back for a little bit of Working Fans Podcast bonus action, where me and the man they call Dave are going to discuss last weekend's GCW events. Now, before we get started, as always, we are brought to you by the Pro Wrestling Vault Volume 1, written by Vinnie Barry. This book features 35 short stories from wrestlers across the U.S. There's NWA champions, junior heavyweight champions, legends. This book is amazing. Pick it up at wrestleville.com or lancebychance.com. And if you haven't read Vinnie Barry's first book, pick up Lance by Chance, Wrestling is a Von Erich, written by Vinnie Barry and Lance Vaughn, available at lancebychance.com. Now, Dave, how are you doing today?
Woo, I'm good, baby. Just out here promoting the show, like always, getting that work. It's
Yeah, we got to share it around. Now, we would have done this live, but
obviously, like my single days. Got to share it around.
We're the Working Fans Podcast, and last weekend it was New Year's. I had a death in the family, so that was something I had to take care of on Tuesday. That kind of affected watching Wrestle Kingdom, but I mean, we've never been big on getting stuff out on time. That's why we've never been a wrestling news podcast.
Right.
But
yeah. We put that work in. We get it to you when we get it to you.
Yeah, we're not the paper boy. We're not gonna get it first thing in the morning. We'll get it there, but
yeah,
either way.
Yeah, we ain't never missed no days, but we ain't on time.
The days might change. Now, GCW, they ran a New Year's Eve show and a New Year's Day show, which is what we'll be covering. GCW Til Infinity took place on New Year's Eve. A quick rundown of the card was it started with a 10-bell salute to Marcus Crane, who died earlier that week, followed by a video package for Marcus Crane. The first real match of the night was a PCW Open Challenge, followed by a match between Cole Radrick and Tony Deppen. Jimmy Lloyd took on Ho-Ho Loon after that match.
Ho-Ho Loon.
He was on the Cruiserweight Classic.
Yes. Was he? He was on AEW Dark this weekend, too.
I believe so. Now, Following that match, it was Jack Cartwheel versus Nick Wayne. That match followed by Atticus Cogar versus Everett Connors. There's a lot of matches on this, so I'm going to take a breath because next up, Alex Zane and Blake Christian took on Dante Leone and Ninja Mac.
Former WWE wrestlers recently released.
100%.
Check your DMs.
Dark Sheik took on Colby Carino after that. Now, this next match was supposed to be a Second Gear Crew versus Young, Dumb, and Broke, but since Mance Warner is out of action, Effie filled in with Matthew Justice and AJ Gray. Young, Dumb, and Broke is made up of Jordan Oliver, Charlie Tiger, and Ellis Taylor. I promise you all those names are real. There's so many matches on this. There was an intermission where there was a Blake Christian ROH hype video for the Hammerstein Ballroom where Blake Christian's going to take on Jonathan Gresham.
Oh, wow.
Following that was an Akira video for Marcus Crane. That was followed by an Alex Colon, John Wayne Murdoch hype video, which was the main event of the die for this show. Now, coming out of intermission, they had a scramble match with Calvin Tankman versus Manders, versus JJ Garrett versus Shane Mercer versus Marcus Mathers versus Yoya. That was followed by a ladies match, Allie Catch versus Charlie Evans. Now, they had a little point between the main event where there was a rap battle between ring announcer MLJ and rapper Jay Free. I promise you that's true. And then the main event of this night was G Raver versus Akira. I've been talking for a while. I know you got questions about the card. Hit me with them.
All right. Calvin Tankman. Let's start with his match. How did that go? Did he win? Did he get put over? What did that look like?
Calvin Tankman did win. If you're familiar with the GCW events, they have these 6-man scramble matches that features a certain combination of people on their roster. This one had some heavy hitters. You had Calvin Tankman, Manders, who's almost like this modern cowboy type character, JJ Garrett, think young Scott Steiner with a little less muscles. He's getting there, but he's got the mullet, he's got the singlet. Shane Mercer is a beast. Yoya's a tiny guy, and usually there'll be a mix of like high flyers, good workers in there. Yeah. This was more of a big boy battle, which Calvin Tankman won.
So I got one for you. I'm going to take you on a little trip here. Brian Alvarez, who talks for the Wrestling Observer, but is a pro wrestler himself, yes, as you may know. Right?
He's gotten in the ring.
Right. Do you know who traded Brian Alvarez?
I do not.
Okay. It was Buddy Wade out of like the West Coast. Now, I believe when you were going over there, I believe you mentioned the wrestler named Nick Wade.
Yes, Jack Cartwheel got a win over Nick Wayne, but this is notable because Nick Wayne is the son of Buddy Wayne, yes, and he is only 17 years old. This is not his first appearance for GCW, and for 17, he is really good in the ring, and he's got a bright future. He didn't get the win, but he's one of the better young talents. Him, Everett Connors is another young talent, Cole Radrick. They all started at about the same time, but Nick Wayne is a standout.
Yeah, I guess some of the other things I'm looking at here, Tony Deppen was he was one of the earlier matches, you said.
Tony Deppen, he was the second real match on the card. It was him versus Cole Radrick. And Deppen is amazing in the ring. Yeah. But like I said, Cole Radrick is another one of those young talents who really is doing a good showing in GCW. And Tony Deppen is a good person to show off your talent versus.
Right. Tony, like he had that match with Ron Funches for GCW that I saw.
Yes,
Tony carried Ron to a decent match. Like he made that work. That was Tony.
He's excellent in the ring. Just recently, he had a run as the TV champion in ROH.
Yes, I was going to say the other thing was, yeah, he was killed in a Ring of Honor as part of Violent by Design with Brody King and Homicide and Dickerson.
Violence Unlimited. Violent by Design is Impact. It's tough when all these names are so close.
Right. Yeah, Violent Design is with Eric Young and his crew. That's right.
Yep. Now, notable match was PCW's Open Challenge. He pulls the GCW Extreme title out of a bag, which apparently he won. He won it so long ago, I forgot. But Matt Tremont comes out to answer his Open Challenge. And this is kind of notable since within the last couple months, Tremont had that exploding ring death match with Onita, where not only did he land on fireworks, but he went through a flaming table. And he's still doing matches. He's showing out huge. That was an amazing match. You brought up Ho-Ho Loon earlier.
Yes.
Jimmy Lloyd is one of GCW's like mainstay wrestlers. He got the win over Ho-Ho Loon. And you would expect this match to be more of a clash of styles than it actually was. And a lot of the times you think GCW, you think Jimmy Lloyd, you think death match, almost garbage wrestling. This was an amazing display of like actual good in-ring skills.
Now, there was one other match I want to touch on before we get to fight. I believe you said there was a tag match involving Effie on here.
Yeah, that was Second Gear Crew versus Young, Dumb, and Broke. These are two GCW's bigger stables. Second gear crew is usually Matthew Justice,
Right.
AJ Gray, and Mance Warner. Mance Warner
Warner's
is
hurt.
obviously out with that injury, so they plugged in Effie. Young, Dumb, and Broke. If you're familiar with MLW, almost think like Injustice, but headed up by Jordan Oliver. And it's interesting to see Jordan Oliver as like the head of a group, with obviously Charlie Tiger and Ellis Taylor being younger and learning under him.
Right. Yeah. Oliver's put on some size over the last couple of years too, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's crazy that it feels like I've been watching him for a good thing of his career, where he used to just be this skinny, annoying kid that could get stuff done, but now he's like an in-ring leader. And I almost want to see more of him, which is wild because, like, once upon a time, I'm like, oh, I'm never going to get into this dude.
Putting the work in. He's evolving.
And that's what you got to do. Now, another Alex Zane and Blake Christian beat Dante Leon and Ninja Mac. That was a wild match. Obviously, for high-flying, really agile guys, and they put on a show of shows here. Now, the other match, the last match that I would say you got to go out of your way to see is Allie Katch versus Charlie Evans. I first saw Charlie Evans at Uncharted Territory for Beyond Wrestling, and she is out of, I believe it's Australia, and she is amazing in ring. Somebody definitely worth seeing. Now, we've talked enough about night one. It was an interesting night, but GCW Die for this was the New Year's Day show, and I would say arguably this had some of the more had-to-see fights. You had Alex Zane and Blake Christian versus the Briscoes for the GCW tag title to kick off the show. Calvin Tankman took on Yoya to follow that up. Joey Janela versus Scotty 2 Hotty followed that. Now, the State of Effie was after the Janela match. GCW number one contendership Rumble was after the State of Effie. And Alex Colon versus John Wayne Murdoch for the GCW Ultraviolet Championship headlined this card. Another great another great card. Obviously, the Briscoes were going to beat Zane and Christian because they're taking those titles into the Hammerstein. Calvin Tankman versus Yoya. This was a real David versus Goliath match. Yoya is a small guy. He got bumped around quite a bit.
And I was just going to touch on what you were saying about the Briscoes earlier too. I mean, there's a possibility that they might be. They have a thing coming up with FTR at some point, it seems like, too, right? So I don't know if that's going to cross over.
Yeah, they've got to be making their debut in AEW, but they've made a great run in ROH lately. They were probably when they came to ROH, when they came to GCW, that's when I was like, oh, ROH has to be done at this point. Right. Because they were like lifers over there. But following Calvin Tankman and Yoya, Joey Janela versus a returning to the ring Scotty 2 Hotty. There's been a lot in the news lately about him leaving WWF, given the other releases. Did you read anything about that?
I just knew he was gone. I saw an Instagram post where he was one of the guys gone, and he just said it's too bad that bean counters can't basically measure passion, talking about the people that he worked with at NXT.
And he also made a point of mentioning he didn't like how the WWF, like when they released people, they wouldn't give up heads up to like their trainers or the people in the system that helped them along. And like they'd be getting messages from people they trained saying thank you. And he just assumed it was because, you know, they were just checking in or something. And that's how he found out they were getting released. And it's wild given how releases have been in the WWE lately, where things like that happen, where people take issue with that. And you've got a lot of talent going on the free agent market. And Scotty looked great in the ring. Obviously, he looks a little older, but him and Janela had an amazing match.
I mean, the thing with Scotty is, though, is he's been training people down at PC. So if he's getting in the ring still, like, he's probably staying sharp.
And he can still do the worm. And another former trainer down at the PC that we've had on the show got let go this week, Ace Steel. And we definitely got to try getting him back on, because it would be interesting getting to see his point of view on that. And it's got to be tough when you work hard at teaching people this craft, and then the people that are paying you to teach them just let them go, especially when you see real talent in the people there.
Now, one thing we got to talk about this event.
It's the next thing coming up, the State of Effie, the Jeff Jarrett attack. It got ruined for me thanks to the Coming Down the Aisle podcast. No offense, guys, but when you're known as the GCW guy and news like this breaks out, they kind of want to know what you think. And I told him I would have to watch the event and see. And after
we roped you into watching day one that night.
And it seems pretty clear. It seems like he's going after Effie. If I had to guess, it would be at the Hammerstein Ballroom. Jeff Jarrett's going to make an appearance at, I believe it's their next event in Atlantic City. And I think that's going to be an announcement announcing that. But we'll have to see. It could be sooner. It could be later. GCW is bringing in a lot of big names, and they're dropping them at different times. So it's almost too hard to call.
It's wild to think Jeff Jarrett and Scotty 2 Hotty are on a GCW card over the weekend.
100%. Now, the next thing up was a GCW #1 contendership Rumble match. The winner getting a title opportunity at some point. This thing went 47 minutes. We're not going to cover all of it. It had a lot of people from the night before. If you want to see a Royal Rumble, but with amazing eliminations, that's what you got here. But in the end, Homicide ended up winning the #1 contendership, and it was a great match. Now, the main event of this was Alex Colon versus John Wayne Murdoch in a death match. Alex Colon is important because he's won back-to-back, I believe, Nick Gage, or no, Tournament of Survival. It's either the Nick Gage Invitational or the Tournament of Survival. I didn't write that down, but this was an amazing death match for the GCW Ultraviolet Championship. It was everything you'd expect in a GCW death match. But, I mean, for me, Alex Zane and Blake Christian versus the Briscoes, I was excited to see. And Janela versus Scotty 2 Hotty brought me in. I don't mind death matches, but they're not my main thing. And it was good because they had this match thrown out and then they brought it back and Alex Colon got the win, as you would expect. But it was just him versus John Wayne Murdoch for like that deathmatch championship rep.
I'm just curious, like GCW gets so many people in there. Is there anybody you'd like to see show up at GCW right now that hasn't been there that you could think of?
Put me on the spot.
I was just wondering, like, he might have already been there too, but PCO.
Oh, yeah, he was on the open challenge for the night before.
He was, okay.
He defended his title against Matt Tremont.
Interesting.
He doesn't make a ton of appearances, but he has appeared. It's hard because the people, I'm going to say this about GCW, the people that you most want to see there, you don't realize it until they make an appearance. I never thought Matt Cardona would be there. I never would have guessed Jeff Jarrett. Scotty 2 Hotty, maybe, because they've brought in people like D'Lo Brown. They've had their David Arquette's in there. They'll get their odd people in every now and then. But it's always the appearance that you get that you don't expect.
If he was a free agent, I'd love to see Walter down there.
Walter definitely has been there. I think it was him versus PCO at one of these Janela spring breaks that really broke PCO out.
Right. They talked about that. Walter talked about that at a show. PCO wanted to do like some crazy moonsault onto him and stuff like that. And, on the powerbomb on the apron, Walter's like, we don't need that. We're not doing that.
Yeah. And GCW, they're always good at bringing in names. I'm excited for 2022 to see who they bring in more of. And we're going to do more of these bonus GCW coverage events because I'm going to be seeing them at the Hammerstein Ballroom. But I catch almost every GCW event. And Dave, we definitely need a little more wrestling to talk because I don't think we talk enough about it. But you know You know who does like to talk about it is Vinny Barry. He likes it so much. He wrote a book, The Pro Wrestling Vault, Volume 1, 35 short stories from across the wrestling world, available by Wrestleville and LanceByChance.com. Also, Lance by Chance, Wrestling is Von Erich, written by Lance Vaughn and Vinny Barry, available at LanceByChance.com. And guys, we will see you the next time we broadcast, which will probably be in about 15 minutes. Have a good day.